Imagine strapping your child onto a spaceship and launching it towards Mars with no protection, a place where low gravity would twist their bones and brains and stunt their growth. Imagine having done so without any idea if they'd be okay, with no research to tell you that it's safe, with no safeguards in place, just a blind hope that somehow, someway, they would adapt and be fine. You'd refuse, horrified by the recklessness on young, fragile lives. And yet, around 2010, we did something just as radical. We placed a portal into every child's hand, a glowing rectangle that gives them access to an unstable, addictive digital universe. Without hesitation or any idea how this would impact our children, we launched them into space. Not towards Mars, but it's a cool analogy. In all seriousness, that portal was a phone, and our parents were right, it is the damn phone. The haunting analogy I just used comes from social psychologist and author Jonathan Haidt in his work The Anxious Generation. In this work, Haidt argues that the mass digital integration into the young developing minds is the largest uncontrolled psychological experiment in all of human history, and whose fallout we are just beginning to understand and see throughout rates of depression, loneliness, anxiety, and despair. Despair, not despair. I said it weird. Today's children are the first to grow up fully immersed in screens from birth, their brains shaped by algorithms, notifications, and virtual validation. The consequence of this is that childhood itself has been rewired. Our minds, our brains, well, the children, adolescents at least, has been rewired physiologically as well. And we're going to be talking about that soon. We're just beginning to see the consequences of this and understand how far reaching these consequences might be. But we see snapshots of it in unprecedented rates of mental health issues, anger issues in children, inability to form social bonds or regulate their emotions, or really just go through life normally, as many of us did who were not fully immersed in screens from birth. And that's what I want to cover. But before I get started, and I know I'm trying to make this light, but this is a very serious conversation and topic, I want to show you a few clips that inspired me in a way. Watch them and then we'll talk again in a second.
Now gotta get a stupid new iPad.
That higher tablet use at 3.5 years was linked to increased anger at 4.5 years, as well as being linked to emotional dysregulation.
Okay, so we all have that younger relative in our lives who is just an iPad kid. I love how we've termed that now. Who will throw a full tantrum if you take away their screens, who's glued to their screens, shoveling food into their mouths, going outside, on a plane, in a car. They are just always looking at their iPad. And then they grow up a bit and then they become like Roblox, Fortnite kids, which is every time I hear those two words, I like cringe inside. Fortnite and Roblox. And to them, virtual play is real play. They're playing with their friends, but in the digital universe. And they're so addicted to it and dependent on it. It's like a drug, and they're in a trance state when they're on it, that when you take it away, you have this outburst. And that's what we're trying to understand here. Like, what is happening to our children? Why are we seeing skyrocketing mental health issues? Why are we seeing young children yelling as though they've been stabbed when you just like turn their iPad off or their iPad dies and they start like throwing things on the floor? What is happening here? Because it's very disturbing and distressing, and it's not normal. And we should probably get into it. Around 2012, something profound changed in youth mental health. You see, before that, we were seeing years of stability or even modern improvement. And then around that time, rates of depression, anxiety, and self harm just skyrocketed. Between 2010 and 2018, the rates of depression, anxiety, and self harm among US college students nearly doubled. For female teenagers, emergency room visits related to self harm incidents went up by a staggering 188%. And this is not just American youth. The same pattern arose in New Zealand, the UK, Canada, and Northern Europe generally. And we saw this like synchronized mental health collapse, one that defied convention. We can't really understand it normally. Like the rates are so incredibly scary and high that we want a scapegoat. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but if we were to choose one of the most influential, pivotal scapegoats in this matter, it would be the damn phone. Let's backtrack. Jonathan Haidt begins to examine this issue at the root, starting with developmental psychology, which is where we're going to start. So let us talk about how we went from play based childhoods to phone based childhoods. Whether you believe in evolution or not, it's very clear that what we do as children is very purposeful. Every game, every fall, every bruise, it teaches us something about being a human in the real world. Across the animal kingdoms, young mammals are wired to play, and that play is essential for development. Actually, research across species shows that when young mammals are deprived of the opportunity to have like spontaneous outdoor play, they suffer from a huge impact on social, emotional, and cognitive development. And yes, this applies to humans, especially actually applies to humans. For most of human history, childhood was characterized by unsupervised play with peers, usually outside. Sporadic risk taking, conflict and resolution, physical challenges, altercations, etc. And this play, the low stakes play that you can engage in as a child, is essential for neural development. So, what happens when we miss out on that? A lot, apparently. And that's really because low stakes trial and error is the way children learn, not through structured information delivery. And this is crazy because it's like coming at our entire education system, but it's true. Research doesn't lie. It can lie. Science is not perfect. Nothing is perfect. No one's perfect. Nobody's perfect. Back to the point. From infancy, we start to learn how to navigate complex environments. We run into things, we stumble, we crawl, we fall, we get bruised. And that teaches us about, well, navigating the natural world, which is unstable and a little bit tricky sometimes. Then, as we grow up a little bit, we start playing predatory prey games like tag and good cop, bad cop, etc. And this teaches us about social cooperation, agility, etc. And then we get a little bit older and we start doing some verbal play, the teasing and learning the nuances of social dynamic. We try throwing out a insult or compliment or say something. We see that it doesn't elicit the expected reaction or the desired reaction. And then we try again. We say sorry. And this really teaches us how to be adults. Like this is essential for us growing up. It is through this kind of play. And every time we get older, we start engaging in a more complex form of play that then teaches us something new. Even as we grow up and become adults, we are still learning through play. We learn strategic thinking and social cooperation and picking up on social cues and nuances. We learn strategy in general. Like play as an adult can be loosely defined. It can be um, ping pong, sports, what is that called? Paintball. It can be a myriad of things. But the point is, we learn a lot from play, probably more than you're learning in school. Don't quote me on that. Also, kids don't drop out of school. School is very important. I love school. I love school with like a burning passion. I was just saying, there's another side to life. And we learn more than just skills. For example, one of my favorite things to learn about is how in every culture there is this form of synchronized activity, a communal song or dance. Like if you think about it as children, we did Miss Mary Mac, Hokey Pokey, Ring Around a Rosie, making friendship bracelets. In the Middle East, we have Depke, and we also have some childhood songs as well. In Hawaii, you have the hula. In native tribes, you have the powwow or the sun dances. In every single culture, there's this kind of synchronized movement, and there's a vocal element to it usually. And this does more than teach you cooperation and trust, and it actually does increase trust in your people around you that you're doing it with. So interesting. There was like this is a tangent. There was this research study where they had people sway to the same music, and then they had another group who did not listen to the same music and did not simultaneously sway to the same music. And then they had a challenge of some sort. The group that didn't know each other prior to that, but that listened to the same music and swayed in the same way at the same time, had more trust in one another and therefore were better at the game. That's how fast this can work. And this is all due to something called mirror neurons, which we're going to have a whole episode about because it's so cool. Mirror neurons not only help us mimic the person in front of us or the animal in front of us, like other mammals have them as well, and it's essential for learning from your mother or your tribe or whatever you're in your herd, but also it's kind of responsible for compassion and empathy, or does play a huge role in it. And so not only are these games or synchronized movements helping us grow in the sense that they're teaching us skills and they're essential for neural development and physical development as well, but they're also helping us form compassion, empathy, kindness, all those characteristics we want in the real world as human adults. So, for most of human history and in this environment that I just described, it is experience, not information, that is the primary teacher. We learn through it the ability to navigate complex social dynamics, how to regulate our emotions. We learn rupture and repair and strategic thinking and cooperation and trust. That is all through experience. But what happens when we take all of that away? That play-based childhood, it's been diminishing over time, and now we're at a point where children don't really play anymore. The only thing they play is in the virtual world, like again, those two horrific games that I mentioned earlier. Thou shall not name those horrific names. I'm just not really using real words. Hold on, let me collect myself. Okay, so emerging research is linking this time period between 2010 to 2015 or 18. It's linking it to the rising rates of depression, anxiety, loneliness, despair, and the overmedication of children. This period is what Jonathan Haidt terms the Great Rewiring. And it is because when we go from play based childhoods to phone based childhoods, we miss out on crucial elements of human development. We leave children less equipped to navigate the complexities of adult life. And that is significant because that means that they are less capable of regulating themselves internally as well. And it puts them at risk for other issues like addictions, for example. But to understand that better, I think we need to delve a little bit deeper into the neuroscientific perspective of it all. So let's talk about our brains. So, adolescence represents this extraordinary time for neuroplasticity, second only to infancy in terms of brain development and growth. And neuroplasticity is your neuron's ability to modify and strengthen existing synapses and create new synaptic connections, basically, your brain's ability to grow and change. And this is exactly what social media or algorithms capitalize on because it's such a vulnerable time in your life. And because it is, and it's very especially sensitive to environmental factors or exposures, we can create dependency very easily at that time in life. And recent research has provided very compelling evidence that people who habitually check their social media or their phone have physically altered brains. Specifically, research out of the University of North Carolina, go UNC. I didn't go to UNC, but I like support it because I like it as a university. Anyways, researchers at UNC found that adolescents who habitually checked their social media and their phones had multiple distinct neurodevelopmental trajectories in some areas of their brain. The areas of the brain specifically, or the regions specifically associated with attention, reward processing, and emotional regulation, the very same regions that govern things like addiction and psychological well being. Oh, and decision making, as if our underdeveloped prefrontal cortex needed more impact on the decision making front. But yes, even decision making. So let's start with talking about dopamine. If you may recall from my episode about why nothing feels good anymore, dopamine is at the heart of this pleasure pain balance. And dopamine is at the heart of the reward pathway. It's the most essential neurotransmitter in that pathway. And that very pathway is what social media platforms trigger by creating what neuroscientists call a dopamine loop or a dopamine cycle. And this cycle has three main phases. The first is desire. So it creates that desire by the anticipation of social rewards. And then there's the seeking. You seek through the scrolling and the scrolling and the scrolling. And that activates your reward pathways. And then finally you get the reward, which is the like, the comment, the engagement. And cue the cycle. You keep going back for more. The desire is the anticipation. You seek, you will eventually get some kind of reward, whether it be like or comment or engagement or views or whatever it may be. The interesting thing is, this is the exact cycle that gamblers get stuck in. Dr. Nancy DeAngelis talks a lot about this. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but she talks about how this process, this cycle that you get stuck in, is very similar to gambling in the sense that you may or may not get the engagement, but simply that anticipation and the desire and the seeking is what keeps you stuck in that loop. And then every once in a while, you'll get that engagement, you'll hit that reward, and you'll get this high, and then you'll keep going in for more. We keep doing this even though there's like diminishing return or not the result we were expecting. And yet, that desire and that anticipation is still there because it is plausible. And if you think about it with social media, it is quite plausible that you are going to get some kind of reward. Someone is going to engage with you or your post or notice you, and that social validation is highly addictive, as many of us may know. But the important thing to notice here is that there is a persistent neurochemical incentive, especially in adolescent brains. Actually, when you put adolescents or teenagers through an MRI scan and they get engagement or a like or a repost or something, the same part of their brain lights up as when they win money or eat chocolate. It is highly pleasurable to teenagers, especially in that phase where you're developing and you really care about social validation and it's like the most important thing in life, which is not a bad thing. It's actually evolutionarily very useful that adolescence is marked by that trait. But that's what I want you to know. There's actually a neurochemical thing happening. There's also a physical thing happening in our brains. Yes, you heard me right. I know we think that social media use changes our brain chemistry, and maybe that's more believable and widely acknowledged, but it also changes the structure of our brains, particularly if you use it during adolescence when our brain is under the most construction, if you will. So, the first of these structural changes happens in the prefrontal cortex, which is often called the CEO of the brain. This area of your brain helps you plan ahead, make decisions, weigh the consequences, control your impulses. And so, when we do see reduced activity in this brain region, which happens with excessive social media use, you see very major consequences, especially for adolescents who already don't have a fully formed prefrontal cortex. So, the reduced activity can look like a harder time executing higher order thinking or self control. They start having a really hard time with impulse control. So, impulsive decisions, irrational decisions, a lot of these things become more frequent and more severe. And that's pretty bad, isn't it? So, now that's not the only thing that happens. We're going to move on to the amygdala, which is the emotion regulation center of your brain. So, the amygdala, the emotional command center of the brain, unlike the prefrontal cortex, where we saw decreased activity, in the amygdala, we see increased activity. And what this means is that anger, fear, anxiety are all heightened. Adolescents become much more sensitive to criticism and to anxiety provoking situations. And if they're spending their time online, which they are, and this is the consequence of that, we see a lot of cyberbullying. I mean, nowadays, a lot of the mental health youth issues are tied to cyberbullying or online related issues. People just have the audacity online in ways that they don't have in person. And ruining someone's reputation online is so much easier because of how easily and rapidly information can spread about a person or get leaked or so on. And so this is the second change. The third change is in the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC. So this region of the brain is really essential in bridging emotional memories and emotional contexts into decision making. So it's that bridge between the two. So, with heavy social media users, we see a decreased activity in this region of the brain, which can diminish motivation, cloud judgment, and impact learning ability. And worse than that, even though you thought it couldn't get worse, it could. The subgenual part of the ACC is heavily implicated in depression, and we do actually see an increased activity in that region. And we see the patterns being laid down for depressive episodes, a hard time learning, and a hard time integrating emotions into decision making. And so we're going to keep going with the consequences. And finally, there's the hippocampus. So, this region of the brain is responsible for memory formation and emotion processing, and a few other things. But basically, we are seeing changes in this area of the brain. There is still emerging research, it's not huge, but it could be profound. So, basically, the hippocampus is responsible for reward processing, amongst other things. And when it comes to social media, you can think of likes, comments, engagement, and just generally contextualizing social engagement generally. But what happens is when the brain, the adolescent brain, is flooded with superficial forms of rewards like these likes and comments and engagement, they start to actually prioritize short term feedback and reward over long term reward and memory formation. This skews their perception of reality and makes it very hard to prioritize things that are actually important in life, which again puts them at risk for depression. Taken together, these structural changes parallel what we see in behavioral or substance abuse issues or addictions. And these changes are happening at the most crucial part of a person's brain development, essentially, that early development stage, and it will persist into adulthood. And these are not benign. I mean, these changes will shape risk for addiction, violence, will determine how your child or adolescent will grow and learn and move throughout the world and what type of person they will become. And it's so incredibly sad that social media and big tech capitalizes on exactly this vulnerability. It preys on it. And so let's talk about that for a bit, because here in this issue, we're not fighting against ourselves or each other, we're fighting against big tech and the scientists and psychologists and psychiatrists who work for big tech to study our vulnerabilities and our human nature and take advantage of precisely that. Luna decided to join us for this section of the episode, and she wholeheartedly agrees that social media algorithms are not neutral tools. They are precision engineered systems designed to maximize profit at any cost, including youth mental health. And the core mechanism, what they use, is what scientists call reward processing prediction error, RPE. And this mechanism basically is the calibration between um, actual reward and anticipated reward. So they're taking advantage of how our brains actually differentiate between the two rewards. They do the same thing with slot machines and gambling. They perfectly calibrate just how often you receive an actual reward, not award. I don't know why I said award. I glitched there. Reward compared to there's just the anticipation of reward. And so think of the reward here as a like or comment, or you see something you like on your For You page or something like that. That is actual reward. And they perfectly calibrate just how often that happens so that you keep coming back for more, but you're not bored. So it doesn't happen every time, just sometimes. It's like breadcrumbing in relationships, where like they'll give you just enough to keep you going, but not enough to make you feel like stable, you know? That's what algorithms do. But it has a cool name. Reward prediction error processing? No, encoding, error encoding. I just said it and I already forgot it. It's a cool name. RP. Let's just call it RP. But yeah, machine learning algorithms employed by social media platforms take huge clusters of data and use advanced techniques like clustering, linear regression, and other kinds of analysis tools to deliver personalized data that is like unprecedented rates of accurate. It's scary accurate. And I'm sure we've all experienced it, no matter our age, no matter what we are interested in. If you even just talk near your phone, you will see something related to what you spoke about. Very scary, very expensive, and they are willing to spend that money because they want to ensure that you are constantly hooked and feeling like you are seeing things you are interested in and potentially interested in. And that's because they can collect your personal data and just predict what you will be interested in and are most of the time correct about that. But it's more than that, right? They're taking advantage of the vulnerabilities that exist and are inherent to adolescence. If you think about it, adolescence is a time where you are going through identity formation. You're asking, who am I? Where do I belong? Who likes me? What matters? What should I be when I grow up? And all of these things are being presented to you on social media. Essentially, they are conditioning you to seek out external validation in this virtual world, and they're giving you access to things like, what are the beauty standards? Who are the idols you should be looking up to? And this is very natural and instinctive to us. Like, as humans in the early days, we had to find role models, right? Because that's how you learned a skill that you really wanted to learn. And it's foolish to think that your own parents would be the best in the tribe at a certain skill. Let's say you wanted to learn archery, for example, is so random, but archery. You're not going to assume that your parents are the best archers. You're going to go out into your community, find a really good archer, and learn from them. You want role models. It's natural for us to seek them out. And on social media, that becomes really dangerous because a lot of the role models we have or we look up to or adolescents do are not real people. They're not really doing or living the way they say they are or present themselves to be. And it's very toxic. Like, one of my favorite things is trying to battle adolescent girls about Kim Kardashian or the Kardashians in general being their idols. It's so superficial and it's disgusting and it's just downright dumb, but it's not their fault because in that early stage, these role models represent everything they have been fed about beauty standards, attention, fame, everything you're taught to want and like through social media, external validation, so much of it from both genders, from people all over the world. And so these people become your role models, and you begin to seek out whatever they have. And in that, you just lose yourself completely. The natural process of self discovery gets lost in the pursuit of digital validation from faceless crowds. It's dangerously entangled with the virtual world nowadays, and that is not benign, but that is precisely what social media algorithms seek out to do. And that kind of goes on to the next point of social comparison. So, social comparison is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, I know it gets a bad rap, but comparison is actually very natural to us. Like, if you were to go into a new tribe or visit a new society, comparison is really useful because it helps you understand the ways in which you are different, perhaps the ways in which you should assimilate or respect the other. If I compare my action, for example, I moved to a different country, I'm comparing my actions to the way I speak, the way I dress, whatever, to the person in front of me as part of that country or society or culture, and it's not matching up. Maybe I have to rethink, like, should I be an outsider? Is this actually beneficial to me? Because a lot of the times in evolution or back in the day, being different wasn't necessarily a great thing in certain capacities. Like, if you are different, you are outcast. And that's not really useful for survival. Also, one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is belonging. And you often feel like you most belong outside of your family to people you are similar with. And that has like real impact. We need to belong. We need validation from our peers. But now our peers aren't really our peers, right? Those people that we need to belong with are people we don't know, people we'll never get to know. But also, what social comparison is linked to, especially on social media, it is directly linked to increased rates of depression because it traps you in the cycle of envy for things that you may never be able to attain. It's not like real life comparison. Like, if I were to look around my friend group, compare myself to them in a healthy manner, I might feel inspired to push myself or try something new or think about this thing that I never thought about. But if I go and it's attainable for the most part, because I've chosen people around me who are quite similar to me in age and background, maybe in financial status, but maybe not exactly the same, but the differences aren't so stark. But then we go and compare ourselves online to people like the Kardashians, who we will never be like. And so we get trapped in that envy and feeling insecure about ourselves and what we have and who we are, especially as adolescents. They take advantage of our risk taking, our poor emotional regulation, and so much more. Every facet of human development and our vulnerabilities has been manipulated and weaponized and turned against us. And that's really shitty. Big tech, stop. Okay, obviously, big tech is not going to stop, but that leads me to, should we think about how we can address this now? I mean, that was a really depressing, provoking conversation. It could be much longer. As always, I'm trying to keep it short and sweet so I don't bombard you with information. Let's talk about, first we need systemic change, but first let's talk about what we can do as individuals. Now, for parents, set time limits. And before I get into this, actually, let me just say I am not a parent. I don't have children. I can talk as much shit as I want. Sorry, I'm cursing. About how I would raise my children. I wouldn't give them screens. I would take away their iPads. I wouldn't let them have social media until the age of like 16. I could say all of that, but I do recognize, truly, seriously, on a serious note, I do recognize I'm not a parent. I don't fully understand what it is like to be a parent. Giving your child an iPad might be the safest thing you can do at the moment. Going outside to play isn't safe anymore as children. You have to watch them with hawk eyes. I mean, when my siblings were younger and I would take them outside to play, I would be mortified. The danger, the violence, the child trafficking, the kidnapping, all of that, it exists, and I am terrified of it. And so, actually, having your child at home, if you can't watch them with hawk eyes, is probably the safest thing to do. You're trying to deal with their boredom. Maybe you have two jobs. Maybe you work. You are trying to feed them. I understand that there are different circumstances in which you would give your child a screen and just be like, this is the best I can do right now. And it really is the best you can do right now. And that's okay. I'm not shitting on mothers. I'm really not. But, but, we had this long conversation. Maybe we didn't know better back then, but we know better now. There are ways to engage children that are not just sticking them in front of a screen, or rather, sticking a screen in front of them or in their hands. There are ways, and there are ways to use it mindfully. Like, first and foremost, reduce the time your child or adolescent spends on their phone. Increase the amount or frequency of group activities. If they have siblings, try to create some engagement, play board games, have more of these things where they can help you cook, they can play different kinds of things, they can play make believe and play out stuff and sing and dance. Like, there are other options other than the screen at times. But limiting it is crucial because, as we've seen with research, the more a child is using their phone and social media, the more they are going to damage their brain, probably permanently. Second, we need better parental oversight. Like, as we know, these sites that are age restricted aren't really age restricted, because if you need to be over 13 or over 18, a child can very easily just lie about their age or just click, yes, I am over 18, and that's that. They can use the website. So we need better parental oversight and probably child locks on a lot of things, and there are ways to do that. You could probably search it up on YouTube and figure out ways to, like, just if your child is using social media, just block out a lot of things on their iPad. Um, on these multiplayer games, probably try to avoid those because it's very hard to have oversight and who they're going to talk to and meet. And as we know, a lot of criminals hang out on these virtual platforms like Roblox, Fortnite, etc., where they kind of have free range to access children. So, better parental oversight. If you can have device free zones, that would be great too. And fourth, we need media literacy education. This is something I talk about a lot, and I wish that schools nowadays would just have like a little course, a little class, part of homeroom, something where they teach adolescents how to navigate and sift through social media. Like, how to sift through content, how to sift through information. We live in a world of information overload, misinformation, and a lot of people are not equipped to sift through that or understand what's real, what's not, what's true, what's not. We need to equip our adolescents with those skills because they are still developing and they don't know any better, and it is our job to protect them. And actually, lastly, is physical exercise. So, this can actually undo a lot of the damage research is showing. Like, physical activity is huge. It could reduce addiction to social media and phone use. It could help rewire parts of those brains that are being rewired, but like wire them back to the healthy starting point. It could help with our reward pathways, our dopamine, etc. Physical activity is huge. There's a lot of research to back its role in helping us avoid these really terrible consequences of social media use. And so, encourage your child to be more physically active, and probably you as well, because it's not just adolescents, we're all addicted to our phone. But beyond what we can do, we do need action from policymakers, the tech industry, and just the government in general. We need better oversight. The first thing we need is age appropriate designs. We need developmentally accurate designs that limit the addictive nature of certain features at certain ages, especially. So we actually need to enforce that whole are you over 13, are you 18 or above? We need to enforce that. We need better laws that protect us against that. And we need to, in enforcing that, like we need to actually check the identity of the person using a certain platform. And I know that sounds like a lot of work for some of you, where you're like, well, if I download this app, I don't want to have to like take a picture of my ID. But the children deserve better. So suck it up. And then for tech companies, we need transparency. We need like a mandate that requires them to tell us about the algorithmic designs and how they are used and why they're addictive. And with that, we need metrics. Like we need to understand the level of this engagement and the impact of it on a societal level so that we can do, lastly, research. We need better funding for research. We need to understand exactly what is happening and how to undo it and how to protect ourselves, our children, our adolescents from what is happening. Altogether, call your governor and annoy them. Just annoy them. Just keep keep calling for action because we need action. This is not benign. This is literally changing our brain chemistry and the structure of our brain, and it's impacting a whole generation and making them incredibly mentally ill, amongst other things. Like, yes, there are many factors involved in the mental health epidemic that we are currently experiencing, and it is a public health issue and it is an urgent issue because mental health issues are skyrocketing, and it's scary, and we see it younger and younger. We're seeing children engaging in self-harm more than ever before. While there are a lot of factors, I would argue that this is one of the biggest factors. It is the integration of digital technology into the masses at such an early age. It is killing us, quite literally. And I'm not saying like we need to completely abandon technology. I'm a big fan of technology, but we need to engage with it more mindfully and more cautiously. We need to understand the risks and benefits. I love my chat GPT, but I'm so glad I got through university and all of my formal education without it, because I see children nowadays, they're like incapable of writing a normal essay. They're incapable of thinking. They're incapable of regulating their emotions. But again, like we need to limit the use. We need oversight. We need more involvement from parents, from government, into how these children are accessing these things, using them, how much they are using them, to the extent to which they are involving them in their daily lives. Like that all needs to be, like as we look to the future, the question isn't whether or not we can live without our smartphones. The question is whether we can live fully human lives with them in our hands, in our pockets, in our faces at all times. The question is whether we have the courage and wisdom to protect the younger generation. Because this anxious generation of ours, they deserve better than to be the subject in the largest uncontrolled psychological experiment in all time. They deserve better. And I'm thinking of all the young people in my life, and they really deserve better. When they throw that tantrum, I'm not angry at them. I'm angry at big tech and our shitty policymakers. I'm angry at myself for not being more involved, but then again, we didn't know better back then. Now we do. We have the knowledge, we have the research, we have the evidence. It's not up in the clouds. We have actual evidence, empirical evidence that this is hurting us in so many ways. So let's protect our children, adolescents. And with that, this is the conclusion of this episode. This was super fun to record. Sorry about all the tangents. As always, I am Rania Salah. This is Ish Matters. I hope you liked this video. If you did like it, comment down below what you want to hear next. Share it with someone who might find it useful. Give me criticism if you feel like you disagree. I am open to it. Take away your child's phone, throw it in the garbage. I'm just kidding. I can't wait to see you next time here on this channel.